Today. No Cops at Pride doesn't include the Overwatch World Police, does it? This is CheckPoint. Welcome to CheckPoint, where we've realized that some of y'all are playing a different Tears of the Kingdom than we are.
I figured out how to cook salted meat, and some of you have Baron Munchausen's flying machine.
I can make fire by hitting flint with a sword, and you're creating a weapon to rival even Metal Gear.
I've gotten very good at attaching bombs to arrows, and you're depopulating all the Hinox with an orbital laser system.
We are not the same. Happy June 1st! Reminder to all those community managers out there to swap your social media avatars to the rainbow versions. As part of Overwatch 2's Pride event, Blizzard has outed two more of their heroes. Newcomer Baptiste is bisexual, while Overwatch veteran Pharah is a lesbian. None of this is mentioned in the game, of course, and the delivery of, hey, it's Pride Month, this one's a lesbian and this one's bi, really feels like some corporate checklist completion via dartboard nonsense, but that's not all they are doing. There are some in-game flags for optional self-identification, and the level Midtown has been decorated with the detritus of a pride parade that's recently passed by, because nothing says pride like a bunch of newly out queer folks fighting each other in the discarded shrapnel of a parade. I wrote that sarcastically, but saying it out loud, it might just be unironically true. Anyway, apparently this is all an employee-driven initiative, something the employees responsible are keen for us to know, because while they obviously don't use these words, the subtext is, of course management would never do this voluntarily. But management did approve this. So Blizzard being Blizzard, this sadly leaves us with the question, is this to distract from the cancellation of PvE mode, or to distract from some kind of new corporate malfeasance on their July roadmap?
Thought exercise. You work in PR for Blizzard Entertainment, and your developers keep saying things they really weren't supposed to. Like the director of Overwatch 2, who let slip that the PvE mode was cancelled before the game even launched, even though the public only learned that PvE was cancelled 2 weeks ago. Oops. Anyhow, I hope our Diablo 4 Q&A session we have lined up with the Future Games Show channel goes well. Spoilers, it didn't. The question seemed kinda weird, like oddly specific, but only about things that people don't normally comment on, like the difficulty of programming for couch co-op. They also use the phrase, extra oomph, which are words only used by middle-aged women in the Midwest. Ooh, skill clusters will add some extra oomph to my necromancer. Of course, all the questions were fake, which is probably more common than we think, but this god-awful execution was also paired up with made-up usernames, which allowed people to rapidly confirm that the questions were staged. Why would the Future Game Show channel do this? Was it because their original tweet soliciting questions for the Q&A got exactly 0 responses until the deception was uncovered? Or was it because the devs had a lot of interesting stories about the couch co-op development process? Well, according to the Future Game Show channel, it's because they randomly generated the usernames to keep the actual question askers anonymous. And that's almost certainly true. I have no doubt the Future Game Show staff, who frantically wrote those questions based on bullet points from Blizzard, don't want their name on them. It was not their best work.
Time for a new segment I'm calling It's Not That Funny, but Here It Is Anyway. Inexplicably, 6 Days in Fallujah is still a thing, and if you need a refresher on this bizarre project, super, here you go. The Second Battle of Fallujah took place in 2004. It was a 7-week, especially intense conflict during the Iraq War. Wikipedia calls it the highest point of direct conflict between coalition forces and the Iraqi insurgency. Not even 5 years later, in 2009, Atomic Games and Konami announced 6 Days in Fallujah, a video game adaptation of that specific battle, which was met with criticism such as, too soon and holy shit, what? Leading to Konami pulling out, and eventually Atomic went under and the project with it. Except that, for some baffling reason, the project was resurrected by Highwire Games in 2021, and now it's coming out in early access less than a month from now. Back in 2021, in an infamous interview with Polygon, Peter Tamte, head of the game's publisher Victura, said the game was, quote, about helping players understand the complexity of urban combat, and that we're not trying to make a political commentary. This was soundly derided as a very bad take, prompting Victura to later release a statement clarifying, quote, "We understand the events recreated in 6 Days in Fallujah are inseparable from politics." Part of that statement mentions that, even though they won't allow players to use white phosphorus as a weapon during gameplay, quote, "Each mission challenges players to solve real military and civilian scenarios from the battle." And how will they accomplish that? With procedurally generated urban environments, of course, because nothing pairs as nicely with actual documentary interview footage about the horrors of war than, checks press release, unlimited replayability. The final version of the game also promises to include story campaign missions recreating real stories from the Second Battle of Fallujah from the perspective of both coalition forces and Iraqi civilians. What does that even mean? Oh, hell yeah. I can't wait to play cower behind my dresser and hope I don't get murdered by an equally terrified Marine. Accompanying the early access announcement was an absolutely wild trailer featuring interviews from soldiers who participated in the battle, frankly discussing how terrified they were, how the first soldier into a building was almost always killed, and how they all knew it would someday soon be their turn, to the point that one of them says, "You start planning your own death." And then the trailer has the fucking stones to say their greatest fear was not death, it was failure. Bro, I am begging you to rewind your own trailer 30 seconds to where you've got actual veterans making the compelling case that their biggest fear was death. You can have a larger debate about gamifying actual wars, but this isn't storming Normandy. These veterans are my age, and nothing about this project feels like they, or the Iraqis, are being treated with any respect.
Nintendo killed Dolphin! That's right, the GameCube/Wii emulator is dead, and Nintendo was holding the knife when it happened. It's all their fault, and therefore you are morally right to always pirate not just video games, but Nintendo games in particular. Sorry, I don't want to bury the lead here. I just wanted to satisfy all the rage bait clicks before I tell you what's actually going on. Dolphin, the GameCube/Wii emulator I just mentioned, was coming soon to Steam until Valve pulled the entry from its catalog. Other media outlets have reported that this was due to Nintendo issuing a cease and desist letter to Valve, and so Valve's hands were tied. What actually happened was that Valve Legal contacted Nintendo first to ask about Dolphin coming to Steam, and Nintendo's third-party law firm wrote them back saying, essentially, hey, Dolphin actually violates the anti-circumvention provisions of the U.S. Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and so we're reminding you that you're legally obligated to not distribute it on Steam. Please remove the coming soon notice. Does that constitute a cease and desist? Kinda, maybe, but an actual Section 512C takedown notice? Not exactly, which means no one actually enters the realm of lawsuits. For more on that, I turn to my favorite news source, Some Guy on Mastodon. This week, in the role of Some Guy, is Pierre Bourdon, or @Delroth at mastodon.delroth.net. Bourdon's work includes... former treasurer of the foundation backing Dolphin's development as of a month ago, and the guy with his name on Dolphin's initial submission to Steam. Quite the Some Guy. Bourdon commented that while he's not privy to the entire story, the DMCA's Section 512C was not enacted here because, quote, it comes with some requirements from the claimant side of things, here, Nintendo, and some liability on the publisher side of things, here, Valve. It also includes rights for the entity accused, here, Dolphin, to counterclaim, allowing the publisher to reinstate the content until the claimant sues. And because Valve's TOS allows them to take anything off Steam for any reason, they just did that. Bourdon mused on this a bit further, adding, quote, Valve could have decided to ignore Nintendo with no liability. They decided to just do whatever they were asked, and that's not surprising, given Valve initiated contact in the first place. So no actual copyright infringement had taken place yet, but would Nintendo have a leg to stand on in court? Bourdon, again, someone who was working on Dolphin for 10 plus years as a developer and Foundation board member, said only a lawsuit could determine for certain whether Nintendo is in the right or Dolphin is in the right. But he also shared that, quote, Dolphin does distribute the Wii AES 128 common key, which is used to encrypt Wii game discs. This isn't required in theory. The tools that dump game discs could just dump decrypted images. In fact, that might be easier than dumping encrypted images. The decryption is done transparently by the Wii OS. And that common key has been in Dolphin for over 15 years now. But how could Nintendo possibly know that? Well, because of this. It's not a fucking secret. Dolphin started in 2003 and has been open source since 2007. It's 20 years old. That's older than most of the commenters that think that they are better lawyers than the actual fucking lawyers. And it's been open source longer than GitHub has been a website. There is no way in hell Nintendo didn't already know the Wii common key was in there. In fact, Bourdon doesn't even know why it's in there in the first place. What he does say is absolutely delicious, and if you've been sitting around with a big old hate boner for Nintendo in whatever you wear that passes for underwear, I am going to love jiggling your eardrums with this. Quote, I don't think the project is more at risk than in the last 15 years. Pretty sure I'm jinxing it. It took Valve literally poking NOA legal for this takedown to happen. For all the shit people are giving Nintendo, I think they've been generally good to their emulation communities. Hopefully this continues. Now, I want to be clear. Bourdon's thread about this is a lot longer than I'm quoting, and I'm quoting a lot. So I recommend going to read it because it's full of nuance. And that's something I'm sure a lot of emulator developers have in great abundance. Nuance. They're used to seeing gray areas and understanding where this thing that they love working on fits into the larger conversations on discontinued platforms, hard-to-find games, and video game preservation in general. For what it's worth, I love Dolphin, though I've never actually played it. I've seen some amazing up-res work for older GameCube games that seriously tempted me into buying an Xbox Series X just to put Dolphin on it. But it's not legal. It's in that gray area. Full of nuance. Go soak in it.
Nuance Beach, these are gamers. Nuance doesn't work. Am Nintendo bad?
No.
Okay, so now we can't trust your opinion because now we know you're a Nintendo fanboy.
Now we know? Coming up, did you know that you don't have to keep a PlayStation box forever? Really? At least according to this tweet from the official UK PlayStation Twitter account looking for some cheap heat. Commenters disagreed, and then we reported on it. The cycle continues.
But seriously, if there's literally no way to buy an old Nintendo game, I think you are morally okay to pirate it.
Yeah, I think that there...
I'm not sure I understand.
I don't either, Siri.
There's a lot of explanation. There's a
Yeah.
lot of background, a lot of nuance, really,
Yeah.
Siri. You know what? We're just going to put you away for now.
It's funny because I said to Heather last night we were talking about this. I'm like, I'm in a situation where I'm like, I'm 40 years old, or I'm not. I'm older than 40, but let's pretend that I can be younger for a bit.
Let's be nice.
Sure, why not? I'm 40 years old. I own an NES.
Yeah.
Right. I can play Super Mario Brothers on the NES whenever I want. I just have to find a way to hook it up to my TV. But what I can't do is play Dragon Warrior 3 on my NES because I never bought a copy.
Right.
Right. So if I ever wanted to do that, I can't do that. And so I look inwardly to myself and like, what am I going to do regards that? Well, nothing, unless I want to spend like $200, $300 on buying a copy of the game, and I really don't think it's worth it to do that. And I'm like, so if I wanted to emulate that, then I guess that's a choice I can make, is that it's like I get to make those decisions and decide where that comes in. But I'm not entitled to a copy of it on the NES, right? So it's like I'm not entitled to just have a copy to put on my old game system. But because I own an NES, it's like I am living a life that's different than the 20-year-olds who came along who don't have an NES and want to play their stuff on that as well.
Yeah.
And so from that point of view, it's like, right, if you weren't around or you are unable to get that hardware, like just for most reasons, then I think that if you want to play a game, I don't feel like you should feel terribly bad about going out and getting an emulator and playing it. But that is a personal decision you have to make, and you have to do it based around your relative level of comfort on doing something that might be, by the letter of the law, illegal. But the spirit of it is different, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, that question of who are you actually hurting? It's like, well, kind of somebody, but also not really somebody. But you're also, the level of harm is minute, but maybe it's not minute. And it's like, it's not for me to make those decisions. All I ask is that we understand the nuance of it, so that we can say, I'm comfortable doing something that's a little gray. And man, we have been doing that for like 20 years. We've been doing all sorts of shit that's really gray. So that's life, right? That's life being an adult, is understanding that that not everything is completely black and white.
Speaking of levels of harm, late breaking story.
Oh, yeah?
That I only found this morning, so too late to write a story about. Our good friend Robert Kotick.
Oh, no.
Good old Bobby.
Oh, no.
In an interview with Variety.
Okay. I was like, with his prison guard?
No.
Like, it was...
Has claimed that there was never any problems at Activision Blizzard.
Is that right?
With harassment or we've done every possible form of investigation. We did not have a systemic issue with harassment ever.
I do find that very hard to believe.
Further, he says, but what we did have was a very aggressive labor movement working hard to try and destabilize the company. Motherfucker,
okay.
Literally trying to blame unions.
For the harassment, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
What a cock!
Wow.
I've never seen... We've been doing CheckPoint and then ENN before that for so long.
Yeah.
And this is the most audacious shit I've ever heard out of Bobby Kotick's mouth.
I guess it's that sense of like, you can say whatever you want as long as you say it so often that hopefully someone will come to believe it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think, is I'm like, you don't have your head in the sand so much that you don't... Like, because that's the thing, saying that in an interview, if it ever comes out later that he's like, that anybody has any proof that he wrote an email to them or something that says, yeah, I know it's a problem, but we're going to overlook this or something like that, then it's like, great. Then hang him high, right? But... Wow.
He told Variety his mistake when the allegations about widespread misconduct first came to light was not forcefully defending the company.
Also, Variety magazine.
Well, because...
You know, yeah.
Hopefully gamers aren't going to read it, I guess.
Yeah. Holy shit. That's such a weird source for him to talk. I guess because he figures it's like, oh, well, it's, you know, the movie industry. What is, you know, gamers won't read that. The movie industry people will, and that way I'll get I won't Harvey Weinstein myself.
Also, I love this. He insists that he's not anti-union because he's the only Fortune 500 CEO who's in a union. Because he's a member of SAG-AFTRA. Because he was cast as the owner of the Oakland A's in Moneyball.
Ah.
And I remember watching Moneyball. It's a great movie, by the way.
It is really good.
But I remember watching Moneyball and going, is that fucking Bobby Kotick? Like, it really caught me off guard.
Fair?
It's like Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill, and then there's a scene where there's Bobby Kotick playing a slime ball. Anyway, but it's just like, it's like, sure. Anyway, this article on PC Gamer goes on to list all the things that they've done to make it pretty clear that they're actually not favorable towards unions, despite his claims. But anyway, just wanted to mention that because that's
it probably won't
baffling nonsense.
It's the kind of thing that probably won't survive the week to come around to next week's checkpoint until we start seeing responses from... Because, again, this is like a thing we're hearing about on Thursday, which means that the news cycle probably dies on it, and then we might hear something about it Monday or Tuesday from the unions themselves.
Yeah.
But
yeah, good call, yeah. I'm sure that many people are currently typing up responses to...
Wetting their pens.
Yeah. Anyway, that orbital laser joke about Tears of the Kingdom is that's a real thing I saw.
There's some, you were telling me some good TikToks. You're showing me a lot of like really interesting. I hate that because I'm like, I could build that. Why don't I build that? I just did like an hour-and-a-half run through of a certain area in the depths, and I was like, it would have been way faster if I just built a ridiculous machine. I should have built the impossible construction and just been like, great, I'll finish this in about 20 minutes. Oh well.
Well, back to shrines.
Yep.